The guitar is probably the most iconic instrument that's ever been created, and it's been wielded by some iconic guitarists we all recognize. Jimi Hendrix, Slash, Jimmy Page, Eddie Van Halen, and Peter Frampton are just a handful of names I can name off the top of my head. However, the instrument that I myself have gravitated towards the most is the bass guitar. I started with guitar and then I discovered Cliff Burton of Metallica. Cliff Burton was the second bassist for Metallica, but shortly after the Master of Puppets album, he tragically passed away in a bus accident. I listened to the song Orion for the first time off of Master of Puppets, and the intro was so unique to me. It didn't sound like a guitar, but surely there was no way it could be a bass, so I decided to learn this song, and lo and behold, it was a super overdrive bass guitar. And from that moment, I wanted to learn how to play bass just like Cliff. But I thought to myself, where did Cliff get the inspiration to play bass this way? I was watching the Icon's Kirk Hammett of Metallica video, and Kirk said that Cliff was obsessed with Black Sabbath and would talk about them any chance he could. And at that time, I was like any other Black Sabbath newbie. I knew Paranoid, I knew Iron Man, and I knew War Pigs, and that was it. But the bass wasn't really prominent in those songs, so I got curious and I started listening to some Black Sabbath, and more specifically their bassist, Geezer Butler. So I listened to the first ever Black Sabbath album from 1970, and I noticed that the bass had something unique about it. It actually did not have a lot of bass in it, and same with the treble. It was mainly all mids, and it gave it a really smooth, unique sound. Which is very interesting because in 1970, the bass in that time pretty much just stuck to the verse and chorus bass line in the entire song. However, with Geezer, he would do the regular bass lines for, the verse and chorus, but sometimes you would just hear him do a random solo when it goes into a new section of the song, and that was truly groundbreaking for the instrument for that time. The song that stood out to me the most on that album was the song NIB, as the intro was Geezer playing a mini bass solo with a guitar wah pedal. This is the song I imagine Cliff heard where he realized what the potential of the bass could be. And without NIB, we don't get Anesthesia, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Call of Cthulhu, and Orion, which are some of my favorite songs of all time. And Geezer also wrote a lot of the lyrics for Black Sabbath, including like NIB, Paranoid, War Pigs, Into the Void, and Hand of Doom, for example, and much more than that. So not only was he a bass player ahead of his time, but also when it came to writing lyrics with Ozzy Osbourne. So I'd say Cliff Burton is probably my favorite bassist of all time, but we likely would never have gotten Cliff's influential playing without Geezer Butler, as he was the man who inspired Cliff so much. And it's so poetic because when Black Sabbath were inducted into the Hall of Fame, Geezer famously says, "I'd like to dedicate this to Cliff Burton and Dimebag Darrell." And I know that would have meant so much to Cliff to hear his hero mention his name during his own Hall of Fame induction. We all know the legendary bass players like Cliff Burton, Paul McCartney, Lemmy, Flea, Les Claypool, and Chris Squier, but the most underrated bass player of all time, in my opinion, is Geezer Butler of Black Sabbath. But hey, I'm just a kid, and this is my opinion.